Ready to get the inside scoop on equity funding? Tune into TDJ Equity Funding Insiders Podcast for an in-depth look at what it takes to access financial capital and maximize your investments. Hear from experienced professionals, including bankers, underwriters, loan officers, and industry experts as they share their unfiltered stories and valuable lessons on securing funds.
Welcome, Funding Insiders, to another exciting episode of the TDJ Equity Funding Insiders Podcast, your go-to source for insights into the world of financing, lending, and everything in between. I'm your host, Jacqueline Jackson, and joining me today is Mickey Fox as our co-host for today's episode of our Attorney Hour. Mickey is a local attorney with a great reputation specializing in business, commercial, and real estate matters. His extensive experience also includes corporate and business consulting, as well as business, construction, and real estate litigations at both the state and federal levels. So as loan brokers, we have seen where the clarity in contractual agreement is very important. So with this episode, what we want to do is to get a clear and comprehensive contracts, not only outline the business terms, but also establish a responsibility and obligations to each party. This transparency builds a foundation of trust and fosters a positive lending relationship. So this episode we're doing today is actually going to talk on that, with Mickey being here as a legal reference for us to discuss some of these questions. So let's thank Mickey for coming to our show today. Welcome, Mickey, and thank you.
Good afternoon.
Okay, great. All right, so let's get this started. If you don't mind, let's go ahead and get into the questions. We've had you here before, so now we have you back on the contractual side as far as how it works with lending. So we're going to start off with our questions today, which is basically, the first one is, how do well-drafted business contracts contribute to the success of a lending process? And what role do they play in building trust between parties?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here. Contracts are really, more than anything else, they're evidence of this discussion that you've had with this other party about what your deal is. If a contract's properly drafted, then you know what every term is, everything that you've agreed to, and it's set out and defined so that there's no disagreement later when you come to the funding table as to what one piece means or what one party assumes. In order to really get a good, smooth funding process going, you need to have that agreement drafted out so that not just you and your business partner or whoever you're doing the contract with understands it, but also so that people, like Jackie, understand what's going on, what they're funding, and then what the extent, the depth and breadth of that funding is, and maybe even what collateral is there.
Okay, so basically what you're saying, and what we just to add to it from the broker side, you're correct on the understanding of the parties, because what happens is when you have an agreement that you brought to us saying, this is my partners and we're all together, part of the lending, they want to see if that agreement is correct, right? Is it set up like you're saying it is? Because they're going to go by what's in writing, not by what people say. And what we run into that makes the lending process longer with this is that the contracts that they bring in, the language is not clear. And when the language is not clear, that stops. So, so in your opinion, working with it, being, and give some examples. I know you and I have talked about this before, of people, how that actually affect them and what they were actually doing with the contracts not being what it needs. So definitely give us an example to talk to us about that.
Well, let's start with just the basics of what a contract is, right? It is a promise in exchange for a promise. And some of the most important parts of that are clear identification of who the parties to the contract are. Do you adequately name yourself or your business entity? Do you provide ample identification as to who's actually, for instance, taking out the loan? You don't want to personally be taking out a loan if it's for your business entity, because then you're obliging yourself, your personal assets, to securing that loan. Maybe the second thing you want to do is talk about what the loan covers, what the scope of it is. Is it maybe just an operational loan to give you a little free cash? Is it a loan that's intended to purchase a piece of property or secure a lease or something like that? You need to have that clearly defined. And more specifically, when it comes to collateralizing the loan, that is what guarantees the loan, you want to make sure that the items listed in that collateral document are the items you intend to collateralize.
Right.
The other thing I see this a lot more than you would think, and it doesn't happen so much with funding agreements, but just agreements in general, contracts in general, is that I might have a contract where only one party signed it, and I'm not sure if the other party has actually executed that.
Right.
Or I might have two different documents. They're two different drafts, maybe, of the same document, where both sides have signed, but they've signed different drafts, and then it's up to us to try to figure out what the parties intended. Really, those are the big things. When it comes to funding matters, taking a loan out on something, you want to be clear on the term of the loan, the amount of the loan, how much your payments will be, when the payment due dates are, the very simple things that kind of go into making that loan. You want to be careful of things like, what puts you in default on that loan.
Exactly.
It's amazing what can happen. A lot of lenders, there was a period of time where a lot of lenders were going to a thing called a universal default, which means if you defaulted on any loan with anybody,
Right.
Whether it be your credit card, your landlord, your uncle,
Exactly.
that could create a
Student
default.
loans, they have CAVAR is the one we go to for student loans. They'll look to see if you defaulted on student loans.
Do not be in default on your student loans if you're trying to get credit for anything.
Oh man, yes, that will follow you.
So making sure that you have those elements written in clearly, that's super important. And it's not something you need to worry about so much when you're going through somebody like Jackie, because that's part of their business, is making sure that these agreements have these necessary terms. But I mean, if you're just trying to get a loan from, like I said, your Uncle Harold, you want to make sure you have that. And if you're lending money, you really want to be careful of things like interest rates. You don't want to run afoul of usury. You want to make sure that you have payment due dates, things like acceleration clauses. There is a mess of things to consider when we're dealing with documents that evidence funding.
So I had, just to go on what you said, one of my mentors had made a good comment when it comes to contracts. If you know you have a tendency to borrow, even if you allow your family to borrow money, like you just mentioned, then it's certain things, usury and all that stuff. So what he said, come get one link, pay for it one time for somebody legally to set you a contract up. Then you can use that with anybody else that's going forward. So if you're in any type of business, to actually, I believe, to have an attorney, and that's why we wanted you on our show, is that so we can show the advantage that an attorney is not just when things are not, it's criminal. That's not the only time you need to think about it. When it comes to business, they're more your preparers. They're going to be the ones you're going to have in the beginning before you need them in business. Am I correct?
Yeah, and I will tell you, there's an ongoing relationship that you really need to have with your attorney as well. Because, for instance, I can create a loan document that maybe 8, 9 times out of 10 will work for you in a given situation. There are different things that can create some real big issues for you if you're not careful. And let's just talk about usury. It's easy to run afoul of a usury law by putting too much of a monthly interest rate in there. If you calculate it as APY instead of APR, if you collect a little too much and you don't refund it to the customer, don't properly credit it over, those can create huge issues for you. And especially with family members, if I had $1 for every time somebody came to me with a family member they'd loaned money to, I would not have to practice law right now. It just seems, family and friends, it's always family and friends, or maybe business acquaintances, somebody that you're very familiar with. It's better to have that in writing because, again, when things are good and when people are paying you,
Right.
there's not a problem. When people aren't paying you, it's a problem. And in fact, in Texas, it's possible that if you don't have that loan in writing, you may not be able to collect on it at all.
Wow. 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 And see, that's what I'm talking about, that important stuff that we need to know, because a lot of us do business on what we've heard or what we thought or what we found online. You know, we pretty much will do it that way, which is not best when it comes to contractual, like I said, contracts that need to be basically correct and legal. And I think we start businesses off our hips and we feel like, oh, I don't need an attorney for this, I don't need an attorney for that. But the thing is, you do. If it's nothing but you to have them to look at your contracts and get it set up for you one time, you have a contract that you can continue to use. It's worth investing in that in the beginning of your business than waiting till you go to court and find out the contract you got, it doesn't have any, it's not as weight in water. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I know you know what I'm saying.
Well, and I know I said this last time I was on your show, lawyers are good about the "it depends" kind of answer. And what that means is that in a given contract, if you change a few facts here and there, it can greatly affect the outcome of the contract.
Mm-hmm.
And if you change a few things, some of the provisions might actually be illegal, or they may not work the way you need them to work. Even though the overall contract might. So it's good to sit down with somebody and talk it through. And even if you have this document that you've used, 20 times in the past and it's always worked, understand that the law changes.
That's true. That's true.
And I'm going to tell people this. I think it's pretty apparent, but the legislature is full of lawyers who draft laws that are interpreted by judges who are lawyers, right?
Right.
Who have clients that are lawyers,
right?
Or who have or lawyers who have clients. There's a lot of lawyers in the process, and anytime there's a bunch of lawyers in the process, it's going to cost you money.
Right. So he's saying, so it's going to cost us either way. Okay.
Yeah, it does. But look, an hour of my time is not that much. It's not that much to pay for a lawyer.
Right.
Just a short amount of time for the lawyer to sit down, look at your documents, give you a good idea about what's workable, what's not workable, what may need revision,
right?
What changes to the law might have happened recently.
Exactly.
Change everything else. Last time I had mentioned that the Department of Labor changed its way of classifying 1099 subcontractors or contractors. That changes everything. Once that goes into effect, the way we do business as contractors, when we hire people, is really going to change a lot. And if your contract agreement with those 1099 subcontractors worked this month, it won't work after March.
Right.
Things will change.
Right. So it's just great if you're in business, this is what we're talking about, you're in business and you want to grow this business, then these are some things you have to look at. Contracts being really legal contracts, especially if you're looking at funding. And I do want to take time to mention the type of contracts we see or the lender need to see before we actually go to closing or even pre-approval and things of like that nature or approval is some of the following are, and I want y'all to take notes of this, listeners, your office lease. Office lease needs to be signed by landlord and you. Okay, that's an office lease. Okay, they need that. They would like to have copies of the original office lease. They have asked for that at times. All right. So then you have your partnership agreement, where any type of agreement that you all have had where you're going to bring your partner in. And like Mickey talked about that family. And like you said, we do family for us borrowing money and everything, but we also bring family in business with us. Like you said, and it's a good time when they come, but it ain't a good time when they leave. Right? At TDJ Equity Funding, we understand the challenges you face. Whether you're expanding your business, investing in real estate, or launching a startup, we've got your back. Our expert team of loan brokers is dedicated to helping you secure the funding you need, hassle-free. Imagine a future where your business thrives, where opportunities are endless and working capital has made a great difference in your business. TDJ Equity Funding can make it happen. Booking an appointment with us is easy as pie. Just visit our website at www.tdjequityllc.net and take the first step towards your financial success. Don't let your dreams gather dust on the shelf. Seize the opportunity today. Visit www.tdjequityllc.net and schedule your appointment with TDJ Equity Funding. Let's turn your dreams into dollars.
Welcome to Frameworks Consortium, your partner for sustainable business success. Frameworks Consortium is your strategic guide, providing you with clear, actionable roadmaps to achieve your business goals. Our team of seasoned strategists provides expert guidance, ensuring you make informed decisions with clarity and confidence. We develop customized solutions that align with your unique business objectives, fostering growth and resilience in an ever-changing business environment. Connect with us today and harness the power of strategic planning for your business.
So that's another thing we have to look at, which is the partnership agreement and operating agreement. Again, these things, like we can say, you need to sign them. Your operating agreement, it tells us legally who's going to be running the day-to-day operations, what's going on, who's all involved in the company. It also let us know the ownership, because anybody that owns 20% or more in a company, any company, that documents have to be brought to the loan table. That's what people don't understand. If you own, sometimes it's less than that, they'll take 20% or less, and sometimes it may be 10 or 15, but either way it go, whatever the lender says, then if you are part of that company, you need to bring all that information to that particular company. If you have someone and you were like on the credit, people come to us with the credit. Well, if the majority owner has the lower credit, then that's going to weigh the biggest weight on whose ownership and what you all get. That's something down the road is a whole different show, but they need to be aware of that. The other kind of contract is an equipment contract, purchases and lease. Some equipment does not allow you to refinance or does allow you to pay them off early, stuff like that. You need an attorney to look at these contracts that you have, because then when you bring them to us and you want to consolidate your debt, well, guess what? That $98,000 machine that you got, we can't put that under the debt. You got to pay that separate. And now it's part of your debt.
You want to have the attorney look at these things before you enter into those contracts.
You're right.
You know what you're getting into, right? Yeah.
Right. Definitely. So thank you. So definitely we want you. And that's why I say I'm mentioning these so you all can have them to look at it. And then any other type of debt contracts you may have, especially if you want us as the lenders to actually combine that. If we're going to combine it, then we have to actually, see that the contract, what you have is a legitimate contract that you have, and that is something that can be refinanced. They got to check that out and see if that can happen as well. Because we have found out some contracts on some debts do not allow you to do that. And that was the biggest thing. And like you said, come to you before you get into those type of contracts. So let's talk about the relationship of having an attorney. So from a legal perspective, what would you think for is the language and the components that should be in a business contract to protect them? Name a couple of few you think they should just generally have in there for sure.
Well, okay, so with every contract, like I said, you need to have clear identification of the parties, the term of what the contract's really about. Is it about a loan? Is it about a job you're doing? You need to have the whole scope of that set out, payment terms, dates of completion, things like that. And you need to make sure that you have good signatures by people who are authorized parties. That's an important thing. You have a signature by somebody, maybe by a member, and that member's not authorized by the company.
Or the clerk that was at the front desk at the time.
Right. Those are the basic things. But there are other things in these contracts that when you see them, I really want people to understand what they are. There's a clause in almost every contract, and I'd like to see it in all contracts. It's called more than anything else, I think it's called an incorporation clause. But basically what it says is look, never mind all those talks we had before we came to contract. Never mind all the discussions we had, the emails we had, the documents we might have talked about, whatever agreements we might have had. This contract is the only agreement. It is the full and complete understanding of our agreement. We're not going to rely on some email chain that happened, a month ago. We're going to rely just on this contract. So if you see that integration clause, what it's saying is we're not going to be looking at anything else other than this one document, right?
Right.
Lawyers call it an integration clause, and that's kind of counterintuitive. Some of the other clauses you want to look for are things that set forth the law of the contract, especially if you're kind of close to the state line, or if you're doing business with somebody in another state.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure that you have Texas law if you can't apply. That way you kind of have a better understanding of what you can expect. If you have Connecticut law applying, for instance, well, then you have to rely on that law, and some of the expectations that you have here in Texas won't
Mm-hmm.
apply there. Venue, jurisdiction. Jurisdiction and venue are actually two different things. So when you see jurisdiction, it doesn't really mean anything other than the court has the right to say. What you're looking for is a venue provision that says, all the lawsuits, all arbitration, anything arising out of or coming through this contract, they're going to be done in a certain place. And if you're in Collin County, for instance, you don't want to have a venue that's down in Houston. Or if you're in Flower Mound, you don't want to have to come all the way over to Collin County.
Right.
That makes it a little easier for you. And more importantly, if you have an attorney that you have an ongoing relationship with, you don't want that attorney to have to charge you for traveling down to Houston
Right.
for every hearing, right?
Right.
So that's something that's kind of important. You're looking for breach provisions. What events in this contract, what events will occur that will cause you to be in breach, or the other party to be in breach of the contract? And then what penalties result from that?
Right.
Is this a breach that can be fixed? Is there a notice requirement that says, okay, if somebody breaches it, I need to send notice, and then you have 30 days to fix it, or something like that. You want to, big thing is you want to check for indemnification requirements, hold harmless requirements.
Right.
Are you agreeing that you're going to pay the other guy's costs and fees and everything if there's a breach of the agreement? That's not just attorney's fees.
Right.
That can be loss of business. That can be if they get sued by somebody else, and they lose something, you may be liable for that as well. And that's why you make it a big deal that you always want to have a good insurance policy, good business insurance policy
Right.
to cover those things. You want to look for, attorney's fees clauses to see who's going to pay whose attorney's fee. If somebody wins a lawsuit or some sort of litigation or something, or arbitration about this. On these kind of provisions, I like to see it with both sides. If one side gets an attorney's fees provision, the other side should get it too. I think that's fair, right?
Mm-hmm.
But generally, the biggest part is you got to remember that these agreements are not what happens generally when things are going well.
Right.
It's what happens when something goes wrong. For instance, what if you can't get funding? You've got an agreement to purchase something and you can't get funding. The standard contracts here in Texas, the ones put out by the Texas Real Estate Commission, what we call promulgated contracts, they usually have I'm going to call it an exhibit, but it's an extra document that deals with funding and what happens if you don't, if you can't get funding. Okay. That'll let you out of the contract so you don't owe any money. That's a big one. You want to make sure that you know what's going to happen if you don't get funding.
Right. So it's more of a protection clause. And you're right. That's why it's important to have real estate agents as well. Because a lot of people I can do stuff, and you can, don't get me wrong, you can. But one thing about having a real estate agent, when I talk to my realtor, is that they know the legal legalities of real estate investing. So
no, you have to be careful with that. A real estate agent cannot advise.
No, let me finish. This is what I was going to say. No, this is not what. This is what I want to say.
Okay.
Having a real estate agent, when it comes to that real estate contract, it will have everything in it to protect you. as a buyer or a seller. That's what I was saying. That's why I say you want a real estate agent, because at least that agent knows how it's supposed to go and what's your rights and what's not.
So long as they're using the promulgated contracts from the Texas Real Estate Commission, everything's fine.
Right. That's what I was talking. The one, the residential one that's from the state is what I was talking. The one that, the form. So that's what I was looking at. But I'm just saying, even with that, the contract covers you, is safe, instead of you drawing up your own contract and trying to do things your way. That's what I'm saying. Contracts across the board are good if you're going to utilize them and let them do what they need to do, is what I'm saying.
The standard contracts can be good. There's a section in there for special conditions. And what I see sometimes is people getting a little out over their skis and writing provisions into the special conditions that really amount to the practice of law, and they create problems. And they don't mean to, and I understand that. As long as they're factual statements, about, what conveys with a house, the barbecue, the whirlpool, that kind of stuff. Right. That's fine. But when they start talking about, this contract is subject to some other contract, or, I've seen other provisions in there that were much worse. It gets a little difficult. And if there's anything like that you need in a contract, please go see an attorney. Just, spend the $250, $500, whatever it takes, to go sit with the attorney to make sure that you have it properly drafted. Because I've had more than one case of litigation where a real estate agent got a little over their skis with things, and it just created a mess. Completely unintentional. Everybody means to do well, but it can create problems later.
Right. And of course, that's that attorneyness in you. When you're giving suggestions, which is right, they do need to come see an attorney on that, but definitely understand. My thing is contracts with people looking at it compared to you doing. And I guess that's more, Mickey, what we see a lot, where not a lot, but when people come with contracts, they're not coming with contracts that was done by attorney. You know what I'm saying? They're coming with and that's who I'm talking to, not the ones that come correctly. And like you said, definitely guys, even though we're not a real estate station podcast, but definitely, like I said, if you're in real estate and you need to go look and get some attorney, definitely see an attorney. I believe you're definitely correct on that. So we want to do that. Our thing is basically just talking about the contracts that do come our way that we run into that a lot of people have no clue. Like you said, that they should have had an attorney involved. And hopefully they can see from this, we're not trying to get you to spend, we want you to spend money and then you just deal with it. It's not that. It will slow you down in getting money, and it also will cost you down the line, for money if you don't have your contracts correct. Am I right? Or more, are we on the same path on that?
You're absolutely right. And it's a business deduction. You can deduct it usually off your business income tax or your personal income tax, depending on how you work it. One thing I do want to mention, you mentioned contracts for things that people are trying to refinance. One thing I want to say is that if you're using your accounts receivable, if you're using your AR as part of the basis for your securitization for your funding, the underwriters may want to see the contracts upon which those ARs are based. So, for instance, if you've done work or if you're doing work for somebody else and you expect to receive some money in, and you're going to use that expectation of funds.
So like factoring, because that's what we call, that's factoring. So we're going to take the invoices from a business that we got and they want to get money on that. Okay, I got you. All right. So basically.
But you want to make sure that they can collect those monies, right? Doesn't do any good if they've got a really bad contract.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. You are correct. So you are right on that. That is correct. And we just had that incident this week. That's why I'm kind of surprised you said that. But the contract.
It happens so often, right?
Yeah.
And there's one other thing I want to mention as far as important things to put in a contract. Generally, a contract will be construed against the drafter. So if you pull this contract down off the internet, or if you write it up yourself or whatever, and you get somebody else to sign it and you're trying to sue them, if there's a term in the contract, a phrase, a word, the definition of something, the scope, anything, if anything's up in the air as to what it means, you're going to lose. It's going to be construed against the drafting party. Now you can contract out of that. There are provisions we can put in to stop that. But remember that if you draft your own contract, you're the one that's going to have to stand up in front of the judge and explain why you didn't explain it better.
Wow. That is so true. Thank you so much. Is there anything else, which I probably got an idea what you're going to say, but I'm going to ask you, anything else you would like to tell our listeners for us, a recommendation or a call to action for them today, closing out our show today?
Remember this. I know attorneys sound like they cost a lot of money, and it looks like they do. And yeah, I cost a lot of money. But what you get from that is maybe a little peace of mind. And I'm going to go back to what I said the last time I was on the show. It's better to know what your risks are,
right,
and to choose to not deal with those right now than it is to have that decision made for you by events and circumstances. Coming to an attorney, that's part of what you should get, a good outline of what those risks, what your exposure is on things, what kind of things you might insure against or not insure against. But you can make that choice then. For me, I want to educate my client so that they know what these things are, so they can make their own decisions rather than have them made by court, rather than have them made by life. They get to make those decisions, and that empowers you to do what you want to do in business and to make your business run better.
Exactly. Thank you. And that is so, so true. And again, to add on to what he has is that, guys, these contracts on our end, if they're not correct, you're looking at a long time of you getting your money or the possibility of you not getting it at all. That's why it's important about contracts, for you all to understand how important it is to have those done correctly and legally. Okay, again, we want to thank Mr. Mickey for coming in, and we love having him on our show. We look forward to him coming back on our show as well, Mr. Mickey. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Miss Jackie. I love being around you. You are just an awesome person. You bring light into the room when you come in. You've got your smile. You are one of the few people who are smart enough to know that there are things you don't know about.
Look,
most lawyers don't have that. Most lawyers know everything, right?
Right.
But you're a real pleasure to work with, and I want to recommend to people that if you want to go to somebody who's going to sit down with you and take their time to get to know you, get to know your business, and to try to help you get through things effectively, conscientiously, and inexpensively, give a shout to Jackie. She's good at it.
Thank you. And on that note, I want to end up, thank you so much for that. Want to end a note of actually giving an overview to make sure everybody understand, like a recap. So we did talk about contracts, and we talked about the scope of terms that need to be in them. According to Mickey, we need to be careful of what those are. Also, signatures is what he said. You need to make sure that's done across the board. And he talked about the clauses of different contracts and things of that nature. So he gave us some information that really would help us to understand how contractors work. And understanding contracts is not just about compliance, you all. It's about empowering you as a business, as an investor, to make informed financial decisions. So, and to our listeners, if you like what you heard and would like to stay informed about getting money for your business, listen to TDJ Equity Funding Insiders podcast on all major podcast platforms. Now, if you would like to be a part of our Funding Insiders community, where we give out documentation and information about the lending process and more, subscribe at www.tdjequityllc.net/podcast. Until next time, thank you and take care.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of TDJ Equity Funding Insiders Podcast. If you'd like to be a guest or get in touch with us, please visit our website at tdjequityllc.net/podcast or email us at podcast@tdjequityfundinginsiders.net. Until next time, take care.